Raise your hand if you've never been shocked by the liberal morals of ancient Rome. The culture of people from that time was indeed significantly different from the standards we're used to today, especially when it comes to the sexual lives of the Romans. But is it really so different from ours? Did they truly live in a state of absolute sexual freedom? What was really happening back then? Let's try to figure this out. And if you want to see more videos on this channel, make sure to like this video and share it with your friends. What were ancient views on sexuality? The Roman understanding of sexuality has its roots in religious and cultic rituals. Back then, people primarily engaged in agriculture, so fertility deities were of particular importance to them. This also affected family life. One of the main patrons was Mutant Tutin, depicted with very big genitalia. This was a symbol of both the fertility of the land and procreation. It's no surprise that rituals involving Mutant Tutin were sexual in nature. For example, brides would come to him on their first wedding night to lose their virginity and, at the same time, enlist the help of higher powers in their married life. Apart from Mutant Tutin, the Roman pantheon included deities directly associated with sexuality. For instance, the goddess Juno personified the female principle, while Genius represented male power. There was also Janus, the god of beginnings, who opened the way for the seed to conception. Such interconnectedness was typical for many ancient cultures. However, the Romans had the most progressive view of sexuality and eroticism. Nevertheless, the influence of other countries was still present. Who inspired the Romans? Numerous interactions with other peoples brought many new ideas to the Romans. Ancient Greece, in particular, left a significant mark. The developed Greek culture was rich in deities, closely associated with the perception of love, and was renowned for celebrating the male and female body. As a result of Greek influence, the Roman pantheon included Venus, the goddess of love, as well as the deities Priapus and Liber. In Rome, Venus acquired unique characteristics, being considered the mother of the Roman people. Priapus, like Mutant Tutin, was a god of fertility, childbirth, and a helper in cases of sexual disorders. Worship of Priapus was expressed through festivities, which according to some ancient authors, were of a highly promiscuous nature. The cult of Liber was also accompanied by celebrations, mystical bacchanalia. One form was conducted in strict secrecy, involving wine drinking, orgies, and sacrifices. Greece introduced the Romans to visual arts and sculpture, where sensual images of women and men were displayed without any embarrassment. Rome was influenced not only by Greece, but also by deities like Isis and Cybele, whose associated sexual practices were borrowed from Asia. It is believed that this interweaving of many external cults with local customs defined the uniqueness of the Roman perception of sexuality. It seemed that during the periods of the Roman Republic and Empire, sexual permissiveness prevailed. However, how much could the Romans actually allow themselves? Pre-crisis Roman Republic. From the founding of Rome until the onset of the crisis in the Roman Republic, society adhered to a relatively standard way of life. The foundation was a patriarchy. Men embodied courage and virtue, while women represented modesty and fidelity. However, the role of women remained quite significant. With the development of statehood, relationships between couples began to be regulated not only from a religious, but also from a political standpoint. It was believed that childbirth ensured the well-being and prosperity of the state. Sex in principle was not considered shameful, and the boundaries of what was permissible were much broader than those in later Christian states. It seems like freedom, but there were also unwritten laws in Roman society. Citizens who lacked moderation were actively condemned. The inability to restrain one's desires was seen as a weakness, which meant such a man was excluded from participating in state affairs and being a worthy representative of civil society. Thus, the frequency of sexual contacts played an important role. The perception of nudity was also contradictory. Unlike the Greeks, nudity was a disgrace for a respectable Roman. This stigma even extended to certain professions, such as gladiators or actors, who were considered to have a low social status. This was because gladiators were often recruited from slaves, and actors used their bodies in their work and played roles of others, which made them deemed untrustworthy. This status allowed them to be nude, yet a clothed body was found to be more sexually appealing. The legal side of things cannot be ignored either. A person's body was protected by law. During the Roman Republic, corporal punishment and sexual violence were prohibited, and violators were severely punished. How are things for women? If men were formally allowed to have extramarital affairs, women were expected to remain devoted to their husbands. However, during the Republican period, the state did not interfere in family matters, and families solved such problems on their own. It was only in the early empire under Julius Caesar that the state began to consider family life within its sphere of interest. Monetary fines or some symbolic punishments appeared for both the wife and her lover. Sexuality during the Roman Empire. The political crisis in the Republic, which resulted in civil wars, changed the life of Rome. It was during this period that ancient authors increasingly spoke about the depravity and spiritual ugliness of society in their works. The end of the crisis marked the beginning of a new phase in Roman history, the era of the empire. However, according to contemporaries, immorality did not disappear. Historians and philosophers dedicated more and more works to exposing the vices of the time. They paid special attention to the intimate life of Roman emperors and their family members. One of the most prominent figures was Emperor Caligula, who ruled from 37 to 41 AD. He was described as an extremely cruel and unscrupulous person, prone to deriving pleasure from executions and torture. Caligula was accused of not sparing any woman or man, and even engaging in relationships with his own sisters. Unlike earlier periods, the era of the Roman Empire saw the more vivid emergence of female sexuality. This is not surprising, as the crisis only pushed for a change in the old order. Rome was no longer a state for men alone. Women acquired more rights and freedoms, independence from their husbands, and became bolder in expressing their sexual desires and needs. Before Caligula, the public fiercely condemned the daughter of Emperor Julius Caesar, Julia the Elder, who became notorious for her numerous love affairs and unscrupulous behavior. In general, there was no ruler or his relative whose sexual preferences were not described and criticized by ancient authors, which helped form the image of a promiscuous Roman state. In later years, Christian authors condemned the moral laxity of Rome, considering it wild and indecent. This opinion has somewhat reached modern perceptions and is often exploited in popular culture. However, the lifestyle and morals of the elite did not represent those of the rest of society, whose sexual lives during that era were not well documented. Furthermore, many authors represented the interests of the opposition to imperial power, which often led to intentional distortions of the facts. Later, the Roman authorities themselves began to change their stance and sided with the critics. By the 3rd century, Christianity was spreading actively in the Roman Empire, which strictly regulated sexual relationships. Roman Emperor Philip the Arab, who ruled from 244 to 249 AD, was a proponent of Christian ideals and therefore banned male prostitution. By the 4th century, when Christianity was recognized as the official religion, under Emperor Constantine the Great, men were persecuted for homosexuality. Female chastity and fidelity once again became examples to follow. Roman sexual life was indeed an interesting and ambiguous phenomenon. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Christian authors attributed the collapse of the great state to sexual degradation. Meanwhile, the captivating stories of ancient authors continued to reinforce the impression of ancient Rome as a hotbed of debauchery. However, the concept of sexuality at the time was contradictory, and all other aspects of Roman life should not be overlooked. Therefore, it is difficult to make a definitive assessment of the morals and causes of the collapse today. Did you enjoy the video? Give it a like and write in the comments how you feel about the customs and morals of ancient Rome's inhabitants.